Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. We're here today, back inside of the Division with another agent build. I'm very excited today to be showing you guys my Saboteur build. You know I love making comparisons to my Division agent builds to real MMORPG builds, specifically MMORPG classes that I played in the past in some form of an MMORPG. So we already did the Paladin, which was what I played in World of Warcraft. And the Saboteur was actually a class that I played in a little game called Rift. Some of you may or may not have heard of that. Some of you may or may not still be playing it. That class, much like every class in Rift, was very adaptable, but the way that I had built that class for me was very much a bag of tricks and a pair of sharp blades in the form of daggers, most specifically. And that's what we were seeing here with my Saboteur build. This is a DPS / crowd control build, so it's not focused on one or the other. You're still really effective with firearms, you can still really shred enemies, but you have a huge focus on controlling the enemy, making sure that they bend to your will so you can smite them down with your furious firepower and things of that nature. So there's a lot to talk about, obviously, with any build. We're going to take a look at the skills, the abilities, we're going to talk about the talents. Also going to talk a little bit about how I've sort of tweaked some of my primary firearms to complement this build. And of course, I'll give you guys my overall thoughts on how it works and where it works. So let's start with what, of course, makes this build. Let's start with the abilities. Number one, we're running Tactical Link for our signature ability. It's going to increase damage and critical hit chance to the user and all nearby allies. Basically, it just amplifies everything we do as a Saboteur. It amplifies the damage we do, and of course it can even be effective in the actual sabotage and crowd control that we do if we use it in the right situation. Particularly, I've enjoyed the Tactical Link for dealing with shotgun waves on challenge mode most specifically, and also dealing with bosses. You know, I have some really good cooldown stuff going on with a lot of my attributes on my gear, not to mention the number of effects that I'm getting from cooldowns with other people in my squad, so it's just, you know, my abilities end up pretty much, you know, popping fairly quickly. And you're going to notice that the base cooldown on my Tactical Link is 833 seconds. Well, I've already got that down to 608 seconds, so some big increases there. Moving forward, though, we have the Seeker Mine running the Airburst mod. This, of course, is our primary tool for actual crowd control. Upon impact, the mine is launched in the air and releases a cluster of small incendiary explosives. It's those incendiary explosives that light everyone on fire, make them regret not having flame-retardant clothing, and then perform the actual act of crowd control. It's great for stopping shotgunners in their path. It's great for pulling people out of cover. Really, it's just going to put them in a state of flux, and your team's going to be able to go to work and start to dish out that damage. That's what crowd control is all about, and it works exceptionally well with the Seeker Mine. You're going to notice that I'm not going to talk about switching out modifications here. Some of you guys may have watched the teaser that I did for this build. Things have definitely changed since then, and we'll talk about why and how they've changed once we finish talking about the Smart Cover, which is running the Trapper mod. Now, when I first saw this modification in particular on this ability, I was stoked at the idea, the potential of what I could do with it. You know, I looked at it and I was like, dude, oh, this could be so cool. And at the same time, I was like, you know, maybe it's just a novelty. Over the last week, though, working with the Saboteur build and working with the Trapper modification, number one, I've learned a lot about it, and also I've learned just how incredibly effective it can be. So first and foremost, this was the final piece of the puzzle for me to finally say, this is what this build stands for, crowd control and DPS. We're not going to swap out mods. Because as it turns out, the Trapper mod doesn't just hostile targets using a reinforced cover deal less damage while taking increased damage, it also provides the flip side effect to any friendlies who would take cover on that Smart Cover. Which means that if your friends take cover on that cover, they're going to deal more damage and take less damage. Yeah, that's right, it's two-sided. It's the ultimate double-edged sword in the best possible way. It hurts your enemies and it helps your friends. I didn't realize this at first, so I thought that there were going to be a lot of instances where this wouldn't be effective because, as you know, in order for someone to get a debuff, they actually have to take cover. Not all of the enemies in the Division take cover, particularly the big guys carrying around like 50 million pounds of explosive gas tanks for some ridiculous reason. They don't take cover. Some of the guys from the LMB don't take cover, specifically the Riot Shield users. This debuff will not affect them. And I was concerned, you know, what if I'm in a boss fight? What if we're in a situation where there's just not enough reason to use this cover, maybe I'll have to swap it out. But once I realize that it could also affect my team, it's okay then. You know, I don't really care if we're not able to directly debuff that target. We're still getting a positive buff. I'll roll out the Seeker Mine, and we'll take care of them the other way. So, you know, again, having a little bit of versatility in our bag of tricks as a Saboteur is something that I feel is very important. And at the end of the day, we follow it all up with a very effective DPS build still that is focused on critical hit chances. We'll talk about a little bit later. So let's roll forward, and let's actually take a look at the talents here. Now, talents are something that I feel, you know, there's no doubt that there are some of the talents which can directly affect a build, especially some of the abilities that you're using, some of the equipment that you deploy. There's always like those 1 or 2 talents in your build that just feel very personal, like no one else would choose them unless they really think the same way you do. And in this case, for me, we have Shock and Awe from the Medical Wing. Suppress a hostile to increase movement speed by 25% for 10 seconds. Okay, here's the thought process behind this, and here's why this has worked out for me. The reality is, with this build, you spend a lot of time moving around, getting really good positioning, especially when deploying the Seeker Mine. There are situations where you want the Seeker Mine to deploy on a very specific enemy, and since there's no targeting system for the Seeker Mine, it just basically tracks out the closest possible enemy. So you have to get as close as you can and then throw it almost directly next to them and hope that none of the enemies shoot it or destroy it before it gets to that target. So being able to suppress a group of enemies, you and your squad mates, and then get a boost in movement speed means that you can run in really quickly, possibly just get right next to the person, as I've done sometimes, drop the Seeker Mine on the ground. At the same time, I'm going to deploy Smart Cover. I'm going to get that debuff on those guys, anyone who's on cover, and then I'm going to run back to my team as quickly as I possibly can. And then they're going to go bye-bye. Most of the time, they're going to go bye-bye. It's really great for that. Not to mention, once you get a taste of the increased movement speed, you just feel like the Roadrunner, and everyone else is Wile E. Coyote, and you're just making them have a really bad day, and that's really satisfying. So that's my thought process with Shock and Awe. Moving into the Tech Wing, we have 2 talents. Number 1, Demolition Expert. Kill a hostile with an explosion, increased explosion damage by 40% for 15 seconds. This is one of the other things I need to talk about with this build. This is a build that makes really good use of grenades. EMP, flashbang, shock, it doesn't matter. All of those wonderful hand grenades that you probably don't actually throw that often, I use them all the freaking time. I use them as second in tertiary, and all of you guys are gonna be happy about that. I don't even know if I said the word right. And you know, the ultimate backup plan for crowd control. Okay, I don't have a Seeker Mine. Well, that's okay. I've got 2 flashbangs. I've got incendiary grenades, you know? You're gonna really make good use of those things. As a Saboteur, you're constantly going to be seeking out grenades. I mean, I go back to the base of operations, you know, just to see if my stuff is popped so I can get some more consumables. I'll open a consumable chest and remember, okay, that stuff's still on the ground back there. I'm going to go see if I can get that. You know, I got to gather all the consumables I can. I'm constantly opening them in missions because grenades are really damn effective. And if you blend it with all these different talents, you know, they just become even more powerful. And the same can be said for using things like incendiary bullets, which are also a really great crowd control tool because they can also apply a burn effect. And moving down in the Tech Wing to our second talent, we see that I'm using Wildfire. Yes, anyone who runs anything flame-oriented, whether it be the Seeker Mine or the turret, knows how effective Wildfire is. Applying burn to any target triggers a 30% chance to apply the effect to all targets within 10 meters. You can't ask for more than that, and you are actually going to turn, in some instances, all of those bad guys into an actual wildfire. Instead of trees, it's just dudes wearing lots of polyester clothing with no fire retardant. And they have made a very bad decision when they woke up that morning, let me tell you. Last but not least, in the Security Wing, we've got Chain Reaction. Damage multiple hostiles with an explosion to apply 40% more damage from the blast. Again, falling in line with anything that happens with our grenades, with our Seeker Mine. The Seeker Mine, even with the air burst, does provide a small amount of explosive damage. So we're going to see an increase to that. And like I said, any of the grenades that we use, they're also going to get a buff from this talent as well. So there you go. That's the talents. Let's move forward and take a look at the last little piece of the puzzle here, which are my current attribute roles. So firearms are at 2530, we've got stamina at 1548, and electronics at 1638. So what I really did in terms of transitioning from my paladin build was take a loss at health and boost up my skill power just a tad. But as I said, I wanted to make sure my DPS was still up there. And You know, I think there's still some testing that can be done. You know, right now I'm happy with the build. I don't really feel that I need any more skill power. It's more about crowd control. It really genuinely is. So I'm not super concerned that my airburst isn't doing a bunch of damage. Because at the end of the day, the airburst mod in itself doesn't do a lot of damage as an explosive. It's more about setting people on fire. Mix it in with those talents like I have, and I'm pretty much good to go there. My gear right now is not 100% where I want it to be. There's still a lot of tweaking I can do with attributes. I can do some rerolls to provide me with some more assistance to those abilities, especially the Seeker Mind almost has no attribute bonuses to it. So the build can just get better from here, but you know, you understand the base of where I'm going with this. Now, as I said though, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about CC. If it was just about crowd control, I'd probably run, you know, the sticky mine with the airburst, I'm sorry, the Seeker mine with the airburst, as well as a flashbang from the sticky grenade. But that's for a different build. That's for something a little bit later, something wizardy. Let's get back to this one. So what I've done in terms of complementing the build's damage capabilities is make sure that I'm running a primary weapon that is focused on critical hit chance. So I have my high-end AK here, which has an incredible roll. I went and re-rolled this thing in the blueprints, and we've got Deadly, which is activated, so critical hit damage is increased by 26%. And we've got Fierce, critical hit chance is increased by 8% when using this weapon. So that's just overall critical hit chance is increased as long as I'm using this weapon. Amazing. Amazing. Not to mention I'm running a bunch of modifications on this thing. I've got critical hit chance bonuses, you know, wherever possible. You know, it's just, it's a really good setup, and it complements the Saboteur class, the build that I've done here, very, very well. Now, as I've said so many times before, guys, it's important to have multiple loadouts, but there are certain weapons in the game. There are certain roles that you can be fortunate enough to obtain. There are certain high-end weapons that can just really complement your build very well. And it's definitely important, in my opinion, as your primary weapon, the first weapon that you use in your first, you know, pairing of your loadout, if you do whatever you can to make sure that that weapon complements your build whenever possible. You know, you could do something like Caduceus with a very high skill power build. It might even work with a build like this if you wanted to really kick up the skill power at the loss of firearms or health, you know, a more crowd control based build. But in this case, that AK, man, just works really well. It makes sure that after the crowd control situation goes down, after we've got them right where we want them, like I said, you know, we're holding them right by the back of the neck, we can just go to town, we can deal out the damage, and we can just shred them. This build has been a ridiculous amount of fun to create. It's been a ridiculous amount of fun to test and to play with. It's easily my current favorite build, and as long as there's a healer in my group, which there usually is when we play, this build is awesome. There's no doubt that when it's just my brother and I, we don't have a healer because our third friend, my buddy Tony, is our primary healer. And I have to say the synergy with this class when it comes to my brother's, you know, very high DPS oriented class and my buddy's pure healer focused class is amazing. The three of us were able to run the challenge mode. One of the easier missions, no doubt, but you guys have been seeing footage from it. They're not really that geared out. They've only got a couple pieces of high-end gear apart from their weapons, and we were really able to have a lot of fun with that mission. It felt challenging. We really had to work together. I was able to really make good use of the crowd control abilities, and it just, at that point, I fell in love with what I had done with this build. I hope you guys will check the build out, maybe consider implementing it into a build of your own. Of course, if you guys have any thoughts of your own about how you would do this build, anything that you might change to better fit your personal playstyle, please feel free to share it down in the comment section below. As I mentioned before, guys, you know, the comment section can be a great place. It can be a great place for discussion. You are a group of people playing a game. You like the game. You're interested in all of these different builds. Share your ideas. Build off of that. Some of the best inventors, creators, scientists, you know, some of the most creative geniuses in the world work off of other people's ideas. They bounce things back and forth. I mean, look at like Jamie Heineman and Adam Savage, two completely different people with different opinions, but when they come together more often than not, it's their combination of thoughts and ideas and the way they look at things that helps them create some of the best possible solutions. And that's how we should look to interact with one another in this community. You know, just because someone does something differently than you doesn't mean it's wrong, and they shouldn't be punished verbally for that either. Share your opinions, consider what others have to say, and at the end of the day, everyone's going to walk away most likely improving what they've done with their build due to the response or the thoughts of someone else. Anything else from you guys? Any thoughts or opinions? I would like to clarify that the Division Weekly is simply taking a break. I'm looking at reformatting the show and turning it into something that makes a little bit more sense considering how much of the content I cover throughout the week. It doesn't make sense to recap that on the TDW every Monday. So the show's going to see a revamp, and it should be coming back in the next several weeks. Also, as I am currently recording this, the channel hit 10K. Thank you guys so damn much. Go mess around, explore the frozen waste of New York City, and most importantly, stay safe. I'll see you in the next one.